Okay, folks, so to just sort of quickly wrap this up, what I'm doing is I'm actually, because the data object is not updating properly, or not updating as I would like, maybe that's a more accurate way to say it. I'm going to use a clean URL. I'm going to split the URL on the question mark, which will basically let us know if there's a query string. Now, originally I had done this and I had written this going straight to the second half of that. Now the problem is, what if there actually isn't a query string in there? And the way that I can test for this is I can test the length of queries of this URL split result, right? Basically what it's going to do is if there is a question mark, and if there is something on the other side of that question mark, then I will have a 2-item array, right? I'll have everything that was on the left of the question mark and everything that was on the right of the question mark. If it's only one, if the length of that resulting array, this query string, because that's what this will generate, right? It takes a string, breaks it into 2 pieces, makes it into an array. If the length is greater than 1, then there's something in the URL. If it's 1, or not greater than 1, then I know that there's nothing there, and that's where I want to have my my default year be added. So what I can do is actually I'm going to sort of move some things around here. I'm no longer testing for empty object. What I'm going to do is say, look, my default year is going to be 1990, but if the length of query string, so query string, my variable that I've defined here, if the length of query string I can type, is greater than 1, then that means there was something in that in the query string, and I actually want to say, look, the default year is going to be whatever is going to be query string 1. Right, so I'm kind of mashing things up here. But basically, I'm doing 2 splits. I'm taking the second half each time. I could be a little bit more verbose about this. I could say, you know, get the second half of the query string and then split that and take the second half of that. This will work too. It doesn't look great, but it's sort of a quick and dirty way to test this out. So back on track, hopefully. So what will happen, so basically the logic here is get the URL, split it, set a default year just in case, but then if there is something in that query string, go ahead and update. And so if that works, then I should get 1990 in the case of nothing. And then if I choose something like 1980, I can see that this is still updating, so that's good. And if I open a new tab here, now do we get luckier? There we go. So now I'm getting the default value as I expect. And so, you know, this is something where this works obviously sort of much more easily because we only have 1 parameter in the query string. Obviously, we could have multiple parameters. We want to refactor this a little bit in that case. But this will get us what we want for now, which is basically a way to share the unique view of a URL. So the second thing that I want to talk about is adding some annotations to your data. So the Google visualization library, right, often does this kind of tooltipy thing by default. But there's a lot more that we can do to customize this. And so what I'm going to do is bring up the Google Code Playground, actually just as a stopover to getting to the documentation. Because the thing that I'm looking for here is there's something, the library has something that it describes as roles. Okay, so basically these are columns that we can, these are things that we can add, and I suggest to all of you that you come look at this documentation, and when we look at roles, we'll see, sorry, I should have stayed there. Look at column roles, it's going to show us some of the many things that we can do to actually sort of customize the view details on these. So one is to add a so-called, and the other is to customize the tooltip. So both of these have value. Both of these can do useful things. I don't know why my internet connection is so slow right now. Right, so we can see that we can add column roles. We can add dashed lines, dotted lines. They have examples here of how to do each of these. And so I'm going to look at adding an annotation. And an annotation basically is fixed text that highlights a point. So for example, if you were looking at something over time and you wanted to highlight you know, particular events. This could be a nice way to do that. The fact that they have this sort of combination of line state. So it says we have this idea of certainty, which for some of you who are looking at projected figures, that's going to be valuable. Emphasis, I don't know how I feel about that one. But anyhow, there's a lot to look at here in terms of options, what you can do. So the way that we are going to do this is we're going to come back to our, I'm going to come back to my fusion table. So, you know, way back when we made our unemployment data. And basically I'm going to add a column, and that column is going to contain my, oops, wrong thing there. I'm going to come back to my data table. I'm going to add another column. In that column is where my annotation text is going to go, and we'll just do a quick experiment to see what an annotation does, what a tooltip does, and then, you know, that's something that we can work with you guys individually on your pieces to help customize going forward. But so here is the table that is driving my chart. And there is seriously something going on with my internet connection. However, hopefully all will be well. And so basically I'm just going to add, I'm going to say edit, and I'm going to add a column. I'm going to add a text column. I'm going to happen to call it annotation. Doesn't really matter. But, you know, it's descriptive. That's always a good thing. And I'm basically just going to see how to add these. So how do I assign a role? So we're going to use the add column method, because that is how we are, that is actually already how we're adding stuff to our data. So, or how we're adding columns to our data. So you can see this is data, or this add column method, which says, in this case they're saying number role interval, but we're going to make that into annotation. So I'm going to add this to here. Come on. So over here, I'm going to add, use GDataTable, add column. So this needs to be my third column, and the type is going to be string, and the role is going to be annotation. And I'm going to now hopefully add my column. So I'm going to say edit, add column. Annotation, and leave it as text. And now I'm going to scroll through to a point that is going to be reasonable for me to see. So I'm going to add something. No, I didn't actually know this off the top of my head, but it turns out that Cats premiered. The show Cats premiered on the West End in May of 1981. So that's going to be my example annotation. And I think this is actually kind of it. Let me see back on the documentation what else I need to do. I think that that's pretty much it. So I just need that additional column, and hopefully this should add some. There we go. So really, really simple way to add a little annotation. Obviously the data is kind of dense here. This is better suited to things, to sort of well-edited data, or, you know, basically where it doesn't overlap. I think there's some control over the positioning, but this gives you sort of the basic thing. The other thing that we can do with this is we can do tooltips, and we can have the tooltips be, the tooltips can also have custom HTML in them. So just as an example of that, I'm going to add another thing here, and I'm going to add it to the peak point, which I believe in this case is December of 1982. So I'm going to say, I'm actually going to put the markup directly in here. This isn't the only way to do it at all, and you would want to be fine as part of a JSON object, because we can put markup in a JSON object because it's just a string. So I'm going to say, I'm going to add this, and say this is important. Right, again, not a brilliantly meaningful message here, but now I can't have the same column be both an annotation and a tooltip, of course. So I'm going to be treating this now. I'm going to just demo what this would be as a tooltip. And so I want to look at the HTML tooltip because I want to have HTML content in there. This means that I can actually do custom rollovers on everything, right? And you would probably want to create these programmatically. But first I need to add this, this tooltip is HTML to my chart options, right? So that's pretty straightforward. And then I also in this, I need to say, and I think P is the tag that they are using inside of it, but I also need to say that this is HTML. So here is an example where they're saying P HTML is true, is an additional property on that tooltip. So let me put that in here. And if all goes according to plan, I should see some bolded content here. Oh, whoops. Still coming in as an annotation. Ah, yes, I didn't change the role yet. So this is going to be tooltip instead. Oops. Helps to spell it properly. So you can see what would happen otherwise. So in this case, so now they're both tooltips, so I would need to sort of find that month, which is very dense, which is why I chose, there we go. So obviously this is not a very exciting customization, but you can actually get pretty elaborate with it. And you can see here that they're actually running a function that returns pretty complex HTML. So how you sort of get that HTML in there is really up to you. As this example shows, you can actually even have actions happen. So this is a case where you can, this is going to bring up an alert. But I can say you can add something to say set action, and that is going to connect an actual interactivity to it. So there's really a lot of things that we can do here. With the Google visualizations in terms of the annotating and tooltips. So as you all are thinking about your projects, please make sure to be rigorous about what you be rigorous about your design goals and making sure that they're sort of the most informative thing they can be. And we will help you with all of this to get it to actually execute in that way. There's a lot that's possible. Yeah, that's all for this week. And I look forward to seeing you all on Tuesday.